Okay, we're live. Hello, hello, hello. Hello to everyone. So this, hopefully, as everyone has seen, is the first of a new series of fortnightly community bites where we feature people from the community in panels talking about a whole range of different topics that are relevant to CTOs and technology leaders. This first one's going to be about how to survive the transition from CTO of a company that you've been hired into or have grown into the role in, to founding your own business. And we've got a great panel here that I'll introduce very shortly. Just very briefly, CTO Craft, it's a community altogether around 21,000 people, all technology leaders, all senior. The main community part is free to join. So if you're not already a member, just go to ctocraft.com, leave us your details, we'll get you added. Very quickly, I just want to say something. We've got a conference coming up. We've got our flagship conference coming up in London in March. We are coming to the end of our allotment of the lower priced tickets. So currently they're £599. We either at the end of January or when we run out of those tickets, the price will be going up to £699. So if you are interested in joining us in London, it's going to be fantastic. We've got a couple of days of great speakers, great networking, lots of activities, round tables. There's also an AI workshop day on the day before. We have sold 70% of the spaces for that already, which has taken us by surprise. But if you'd like to get involved with that and learn how real CTOs are really using AI to improve how things are done within their technology functions, you're going to want to catch that. There's a little button at the bottom of the screen that takes you to the tickets registration page. We would love to have you with us. Have a click, have a look around, check out the agenda, check out all the activities, and hopefully you'll join us there. But that's the conference. Okay, so let's say hello to our panelists. So we'll start off with Naman. He's the founder of Crushed AI, which is in the trust in hiring space, I believe, Naman. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
He founded that after a career with Microsoft, Oracle, an electric vehicle startup, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he now runs a bookshop at a co-working space in Vadodara in Gujarat in India. Great to have you with us, Naman. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's absolute honor to be here. Thanks, Andy.
Brilliant. We have Hole. He's probably quite a familiar face. You'll have seen him at conferences and panels. We do a lot of work with his company, Skiller Whale. He's a 3-time founding CTO. He's a CTO coach. He runs CTO dinners, a CTO coffee club. And as I say, he's now running Skiller Whale, which is a technology skill coaching business that is doing very well, and we're great friends.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Andy. And to echo what you said, I have found the CTO Craft community to be very valuable in my journey as a CTO, and I highly recommend the conference to anyone who hasn't signed up yet.
Brilliant. Cheers all. And then we have Carol, who's an executive coach and a leadership consultant. She helps technology leaders with career growth and visibility and influence. She has also worked with us on one of the courses on CTO Craft Campus, which is around emotional intelligence for leadership. But she has worked with a number of leaders who have made that transition from purely leading technology to founding their own business. And it's great to have you with us, Carol.
Thank you for having me, for inviting me. It's an honor to be here and bring some of this emotional intelligence perspective on this decision.
Excellent. Good stuff. Okay, well, let's crack on. Let's start with Naman. Okay, I have a question about the spark, I suppose. Was there a specific point that you can remember where you got to a stage in your career as a technology leader where you thought you would like to start something of your own?
I think for me, it was a little pre-decided that I wanted to kind of dabble into this. It was more of like, if I don't start something for myself, I'd regret it, that kind of a thing, that I think a lot of smart folks in general kind of identify with, not necessarily tech, but especially tech. So I, on the other hand, actually went through my roles in some way, like trying to see what can I learn that can help me later on in my journey. There's one of the big things, especially when I was leading tech at Euler Motors. That's the electric vehicle startup in India. I was like part of presentations to VCs, helping my founder set direction. That was like a little more like, so it was more like not a moment of spark, but it's like something that I gathered as I've been growing up, that and nobody's ever done business in my family. We're all like government, service people. So for me, that sparks like something that it's just a little bit of things that I've always imagined that I could do. And when I turned 30, I was like, okay, this is the time to put things into action and stop thinking and like actually doing. That's when I made the decision to move from US to India, quit my job, quit corporate, started going into startups. But that was the process behind, like, it's like more like, okay, this is the time now. Let's just do it, because there's no spark that's going to come. You've just got to decide and like get into it.
Did it coincide with any sort of like big life changes? Did you aim to go down that path because something else had changed in your life, or was it just that you were generally sort of getting the entrepreneurial itch?
I think it is, but for me, I think it was in hindsight. Something kind of kept nudging me that I'm turning 30 now. So maybe it was that. Like it was like, hey, I'm 30, I've done enough tech. I've spent like, time building lots of complex distributed systems. I think I understand tech at scale. It's time to now, do what I wanted to do instead of, just keep thinking about it, trying to gather more data. So maybe that's the thing, right? Like maybe I was just aging, and that is what pushed me over the edge, really.
Sorry, Carol, go for it.
Aging at 30, it's
I was going to say.
I don't know. For me, it's like.
Do you still feel now that you were old when you were 30?
Absolutely not. It feels like I had all the time in my life. Now that I'm 35, not too older than 30, but now that I'm actually doing it, I was like, okay, but to be honest, right? Like I actually think that I could have started way earlier. I could have started. We were talking a while ago, but I wish I would have started back in college. Right? Because it takes that much time to kind of learn those muscles. So aging may be a part of at least like my journey, but that kind of I was always intending to, but then the actual plunge happened because of like just circumstances that were boiling on over.
I think there is that stigma of the younger entrepreneur as well, isn't there? You see all the stories of very, very young people like Mark Zuckerberg, and there is a very romantic image.
Sorry, but I also see the other way around. I have clients who want to become founders because they feel old. They are close to 50 or they're over 50. They feel like the ageism in the market is too big and they're not going to be able to be hired. They're not going to get a job. So that's one of the reasons they decide to go to the founder path. And so I think it goes both ways when you have society pressuring you and you have all these the models around you of people doing that. So you want to follow that model. And the young startupper, it's a model that we see a lot. While other types of startup of founders, we don't often see that much.
True.
It's been a while since I looked at the statistics on this, but last time I checked it out, the most successful demographic of founder was 40 to 50-year-old women. Almost the exact opposite of the demographic that you hear about more, and that gets lauded more. And I feel like that relates to a thing that I feel like I should acknowledge as part of my founding story, that like having social privilege makes it way easier to be a founder. Being like a white, straight, cis male dude, like it is much easier to take that leap. Like as a child, I was always just like, let's just start a thing. I like collected football cards when I was young, like stickers that you'd put in like a book of like different football players. And I was like, we should have a swap shop in school. So I just started that. I realized I could buy Whisper bars in bulk and sell them cheaper than the school canteen. So there was a period where, like maybe a month or so before the school told me to stop, that I was doing that. But it was always just felt like there was this book I read as a child by Terry Pratchett called Only You Can Save Mankind. And there's this like key point in the story where someone is told, if not you, who else? And it's just like, yeah, actually, growing up in that way, it's very easy to just be like, well, anyone else could do it, so why don't I just be the person who does, and I'll found that thing. And I think that way of thinking made it way easier later in life to found a company.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody has a good answer for this, but can anyone suggest a definition for what that entrepreneurial spark actually is? I mean, how do you recognize it in yourself versus just wanting to, fulfill a stereotype of getting to a certain age, then needing to start your own thing, for example? But what is that spark?
For my clients' perspective, I feel like the same way as Neman told, there is no spark, especially because tech minds are very risk averse. So usually they want to be sure everything is going to be in place for them to take the risk, especially if you have a risk because you're not young, you already have a family to support. So all these responsibilities of supporting a family is very strong in tech minds as well. So I think that sometimes they have a blind spot on the spark because they tend to pay attention, to focus more on the obstacles than what is it that you're feeling and why, what is the reason that you want that. So it's this rational mind that guides you to be rational, to understand why you want this in a rational way, instead of connecting to that passion of building something.
Yeah, totally agree with that. Yeah, risk aversion certainly a part of it. Yeah, or lack of.
You kind of mentioned statistics, Howell, but as I don't know, I think I was going through some YC stuff, and they there's like a clear line of, if you've done any kind of business, like small business early on, like as a child or as a teenager, you're far likely to kind of succeed as a businessman later in life. There's some kind of statistical. Like I ran like back in, and when I read that, I went back and I thought that I actually did run a pot painting business back here in India. I would go down the neighborhood painting pots for like 20 rupees. That's 20 Indian rupees. It's like $50, right? And we made, like, I remember me and my friends, we made like $1,000 in the entire summer, and that was like in 6th grade or something. I don't think there's a spark, but I do think that there's a nudging kind of thought back of the mind that I want to do something more than what I'm doing now. And I think that has to come to shore with some kind of circumstances, and people should kind of try to follow that. If you have the financial and social, as Howell said, like social currency to try it, you should try it. It's a thing, and I think it's well worth it.
Are there any myths that we can talk about around that jump? It's a very romantic notion of sort of getting to a point where you have such a wealth of experience in what you do, and then wanting to take it to build your own thing and make your fortune. What myths have you come across?
One of that I've seen, I think that I also call these myths like limiting beliefs, because sometimes like you believe that so much that it gets in the way of you following your path or trying something new. And it's usually the myth that you're going to be of what success means to you. So instead of understanding and copying what success looks for other people on Instagram, or that images of people, they are going to live your dream because you're building something that's your own, and you're not going to have interference when you're building. Some CTOs, of course not all, they want to take this path because they're fed up of being told what to do, and they don't want an interference on the product creation. So they think that if they go to the founder, if they become a founder, then there will be no interference on what they built. And I think this is a huge myth, especially if you're going after venture capitals. You have your clients to tell you what they want. And I think that just disguises when you are a CTO and you blame it on the CEO or in the sales department. And if they all didn't exist, the product would be perfect.
Yeah, totally agree with that. I think that's what
I think
Miguel is pointing at as well. Yeah, in the chat.
I think there's a bit of a myth around, I'm going to call them the baby and the bunker. There's a myth that founding a thing turns it into your baby, and like you love it and care for it and it will always be yours. I might have said that before having had children, and now I would say it's really very different. I'm very open to like starting an idea and then leaving it behind, either to perish or for someone else to run in a way that I absolutely don't feel about my own children. But I think there's also a myth around the idea of what you really need is to just have dedicated time, like locked away from the world and just creating the thing until it's perfect. And then you'll just, open the doors and success will be inevitable and exponential. I think the reality in both cases is very different. The reality, I think, is that you should be willing to try ideas out and then just forget them and move on from them and crack on with the next thing, and that you can do it very much as a part-time thing while you're kind of auditioning those ideas for whether they're worth pursuing, and that you should be doing that in whatever the opposite of isolation is. The actual building of the thing comes very much secondary to talking to the people who might pay money for whatever it is that you're building, because those are ultimately, you want to take on the role of a servant. You want to take on the role of understanding what their needs are and trying to fulfill them. And that, I think, is very different from isolating yourself because you're convinced you've got the perfect idea, creating it, and then waiting for like the market to reach you. The opposite is true.
Yeah, I think there's absolutely a trend for building in public. I think over the last 5 years, I don't have any statistics on whether that kind of approach is more successful than building in private and then doing a big bang launch to the world. But certainly I've seen a lot more people build entire businesses very, very publicly and very visibly. So, there's definitely something to that. I think going back to your other point as well, Hul, there's a famous phrase, kill your darlings. And certainly from my perspective, I had never reached a point where my ego would allow me to kill the things that I had poured my energy and my emotion into until I started my own business. And then it becomes a necessity, right? You have to be willing to take the ego hit and just get rid of the stuff that you built and that you love. But, yeah.
I think building in public is a great idea, particularly if the people you're building for are the kind of people who are interested to see the formation of a company. But I think even before that, even before you start building it, the way that you talk to customers, and that should be like the primary thing that you're spending time on in the early days, is talking to people who might become your customers. The way that you do that is so crucial to get right before you write a line of code, before you even incorporate a company, to understand what problem it is you could be solving and other people's perspectives on it. I've seen people who talk about founding as if you just read enough analyst reports and that will tell you the thing to build, or you look enough kind of market reports or where the market seems to be going and that will tell you what to build. I don't think any of that is a substitute for talking to customers, asking probing and penetrating questions and working back from there before you even consider what your product or what your company would be.
Yeah, I think in the end, it's about falling in love with the problem instead of falling in love with your product. Yes, and that's what I've heard a lot in the incubation program I was part of. And if you are in love with the product, you will have so many blind spots that you won't be able actually to release and make that useful for someone else. But if you fall in love with the problem, then you can make adjustments to your initial idea until it actually fits the market and you have a market fit.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. Okay, let's have a chat about the early days of being a business owner / founder, etc., etc. What were the biggest shockers? Let's start with Howell. When you started your first thing, having come out of uni, what were the things that immediately leapt to your mind and thought, I never saw this coming?
One thing that I definitely saw coming, but I didn't realize how present it would be in my thinking, is just runway. I think sometimes as a technologist, it's easy to see the sort of financial side as this like murky sort of dark arts, like sure, money is here, but it's just a necessary evil. That becomes your main the main thing that you think about when you have a fixed amount of runway and you're just trying to extend it. I think another thing, at least in my experience, is the amount of admin and legal stuff that comes back to you as a founder is really high. So I don't just mean like GDPR compliance, or ISO compliance, the kind of thing you're probably thinking about as a CTO anyway, but like contract review, thinking about terms, like what kind of indemnity should we agree to in this case? What are the potential the future of this relationship, and what are the loopholes there? Is this phrasing really right? And then explaining that on to other non-technical people. But my experience has made me realize that when there's a very small team, technical people are very often comfortable with getting used to technical language and like learning domain specific languages, picking them up and interpreting documents using those terms in a way that I guess comes up less in other roles, which means you are quite well suited for being the person who learns how to interpret contracts and things like that. But certainly in the early days, that's something that has often landed on my shoulders as a founder.
Carol, any input on this one?
I always have something to say. It's impossible not to have something to say. Of course, what I see and my clients sometimes they face when they make this transition is imposter syndrome. If that was something that they let go in the past, usually this phenomenon happens again because you have to change identities. You cannot be the expert anymore, and you have to adapt to a more business person attitude. And some of my clients actually reach out to me when they first step into the CTO role, on the founder role, and they feel like, I don't know how to speak to people, I don't know how to network, I don't know how to present myself in a different way. And I'm super afraid of not being valued for what I always have been valued, like my expertise, my technical expertise. So there is a real identity crisis sometimes when you make this shift from being super knowledgeable and admired for that, and then you have to let go of this part into taking care of business, clients, understanding other people's needs, and actually be more people oriented. So if you don't pay attention to this and you think that this transition is just going to make you work on things that you want and that's pleasurable to you, then you will feel this even worse. But if you're ready to understand that you are going to feel lost, and this is the beginning of a new role, that you have to go back in your mind that you are a beginner in the role. Although you have the C-level title and you've been an executive for years and years and years, this will be new. And you have to have a growth mindset in order to learn from peers, from events like that, and trying to find your own blind spots.
Yeah. This is one thing, one real quick thing, Andy, is that I always look back at 2024 and I felt like I was just going through a drunken walk phase. There's this drunken walk phase that I hope it doesn't come to you, but you're far better at analyzing and as Hal said, gauging the problem. But that's also why, in the beginning when you're kind of figuring out the problem, your Hal's point is the best. Like, you talk to so many people, talk to customers, and as Carol said, right, like you're coming back to a beginner mindset is one thing. Let's say even if you are, all of us, I think at CTO Craft, we're tech people. We're not afraid of scale. We're not afraid of what will happen if the company lives for 5 years. We're cool with that. We've been doing that so long. But it's the beginning when there's nothing on the table and you're figuring out what to do is what I call the drunken phase, right? I was going 0 to 1. You're kind of figuring out that this is who we are for, and this is what we solve for them, right? And these two questions, they go through at least I went through months and months of just talking to people, changing the problem, changing my approach to talking to people who face the problem. And even when I was somebody who had the problem in the past, I'd experienced the problem that I'm looking to solve now. And But I think that drunken phase is going to come, and you've got to be just like willing to accept that discomfort that comes with not knowing what you're actually trying to solve. So it's a little bit of that. The best analogy I give is people who played Age of Empires. It's like the map's unexplored, right? In a lot of these strategy games, the map's unexplored and you have to explore it. Until then, you can't build all your tanks and all your armies. You have to explore the map. It's a little bit of that. And I think people don't think of this when they're like, being in their tech leader roles. They don't think of things that they don't know. And you've got to kind of just be ready for it.
I think there's another, Naman, in that you've added another myth that we should have talked about earlier that people have about founding, which is that because you've experienced the problem, other people have, and you're a good customer for it. And just doesn't work like that.
No.
So like early days of Skill a Whale, right? I was very frustrated with what training looked like for software teams. I think a lot of the training options we have for our teams make very little difference to productivity. And so I did maybe 50 interviews with other CTOs, other tech leaders, where I just take them for coffee and talk to them for an hour and just ask questions about this. And it became really clear to me that everyone's expectations from training were so low that the answer, the way that we thought about ourselves, was not we're a training company, but was actually became we are not a training company because you think you know what training is, and it's this really bad thing that makes no difference to your teams and what they can do and outcomes, and it's almost like a perk that you offer on the side, and instead we are this other thing that you haven't seen before. But I felt like they had the same problem, but the way they thought about it was so different, and that meant the way that we went about founding the company looked completely different because we had to see things from their perspective. It's what Carol said. We had to love the problem that they were facing, but be willing to just humbly throw away our ideas about what the solution looked like and focus on their perspective and speaking to that.
Yeah, this is just like a quick tip. This is not to say that some of the ideas that founders have are not relevant, or the way, because often the only difference is a founder is looking at the same problem, but they're looking at it differently, right? And that's important. But marrying that idea to what's actually on the ground that the customer is facing is kind of super critical, and that's something that people underestimate. I clearly underestimate it.
Yeah, I think my biggest learning at that time was about how much of my ego I needed to preserve and how much I needed to allow to fall by the wayside a little bit. When you're a founder, you have to be prepared for a lot of rejection and a lot of disappointment. Killing your darlings, as we said earlier on, all this sort of stuff is very new when you start your own business and you have a large group of people relying on you. It was quite a difficult transition, I've got to say, when I first did it, but I'm glad I did.
And I think that speaks also to your understanding of your mindset around mistakes. One of my clients told me that one of his concerns about going to the founder path, although he loved the lifestyle, he actually wanted the lifestyle, not just like building something on his own, but it was, okay, I cannot make mistakes. I want to be sure I'm not going to make mistakes. And then I say, I would change my mindset into, I'm sure I'm going to make mistakes. and I'm prepared for that, even to fail my first attempt of company, of product, or anything else. If you are super strict with what mistakes mean to you, it's going to be a lot of suffering, a lot. Right. And the worst, it will reflect on you. People will instantly think that if they made a mistake or they failed at an assumption or a product, that they failed. So it's a super focused, ego-focused perspective on going right and wrong. And usually that happens with everything, not just becoming a founder, this decision. We give ourselves a lot more credit than the circumstances, for the good and for the bad. This is psychological research. And sometimes it's just the circumstances. Sometimes you made a mistake and you don't know how to deal with that frustration, but sometimes it was not just the moment for that, or you had a pandemic, or you didn't go to the right partner, the co-founder, to do that. So learning to separate what is yours and what is circumstantial, it's super important along the path, not only to make this decision.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that fixed versus growth mindset thing. It's that humility of realizing that your ideas are wrong. And I think absolutely what you said, Carol, like failure will happen, and it's actually a good thing. There are so many steps between idea and then successful business where the failure could happen. One of the bits of advice I used to give early stage founders was to work out what the thing that was most likely to make them fail, and just aim hard at that and see if they could make it succeed. And then if they can't, that's great. We throw away the idea and move on to the next one. And if you don't fail at that, you move on to the next problem that you see as the kind of barrier to the business ever succeeding. And for me, a successful business is where you keep aiming at failure and just manage to miss every time, rather than aiming at success and just like straining really hard to try and keep it there, even though you know that there's this like big lurking failure monster around the corner that you're just not going to look at yet.
Yeah, that really puts
I'm
that
pretty sure there's a stoic philosophy around this. I'm pretty sure. I don't know what it's called. This is a part of stoicism. But go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I think this resonates with the whole part of the spark being around risk acceptance as well, doesn't it? Yeah, it's all tied together. Anyway, let's talk about teams. So obviously, I mean, you can run a business of your own on your own if you really, really want to. But at some point, most companies are going to need people to do the various bits of them. Does anyone have any war stories? Any advice for people who are building out their initial team? Because obviously it's more than just technical people now, right? And it's going to be other functions as well. Anyone got any stories?
Loads. I mean, I think one of the first things is you're not like when you're hiring or you're looking for partners to start with. Obviously, your co-founder's choice is like the most crucial. But even if you don't have a co-founder, like figuring out the first few people is so much about just their tenacity to solve problems, and so less about the actual skill levels. Obviously, they've got to pass a threshold, but we really, really need people who are okay with chaos, or okay with, because every couple of months you're going to be like, okay, this is the direction we're going to go in. Oh, hey, this is the new direction that we're going to go in. So we're going to like, hey, okay, all of these changes happening and people are going to have to be fine with it, right? So finding teammates is a lot more about like people who are okay with chaos and less about people, who are just the best skill set that you want to match for. Same with co-founders. Like I'm of the opinion that co-founders are not found; they're kind of built. Either they are people who you know from your past, or even if you're starting a new journey, it's like dating. But you've got to, far more important is to have a person who kind of, I'm going to use the word vibe, but really vibes with you, based on what your beliefs are around solving a problem, what your beliefs are around what kind of business you're running. One of the things that I did with my co-founder is that we're kind of old souls in that manner, that we wanted to build a traditional business, right? We didn't want to run a VC split scale business, and we really connected on that idea. And that is a very comforting thing, that if somebody thinks in this manner, there's so many other pieces that fall in line, right? Because we agree on hiring, we agree on so many things, just because of the fact that we're a little old school in how we want to build this business. So all of these smaller things matter far more than actual skill sets, hard skills of like programmers or marketers, and just people who've got to have like comfort in dealing with chaos and learning. That's been like so many war stories around these. We go to demos fail. We go to customers kind of just making us wait for 5 hours. So many of these stories, and they're going to happen. They're 100% going to happen. And the team just got to have to have that tenacity to get through that. That's been one of my biggest learnings about teams.
Yeah.
I think for the founding team, you really need that shared vision, right? That shared idea of what the future looks like. Founder breakup is one of the main causes of startups failing. And so you need to know that in 3 years, this person isn't going to turn around and say, great, how do we hyperscale it? If that is the opposite of what you want to do. I think approach to conflict is one that I found super important to me. It's actually, if you apply to Y Combinator, one of the questions that they say they put a lot of emphasis on is what projects have the co-founding team done before? They want to know that you've collaborated on something. And it seems that part of that is the assumption that you will have had fallings out along the way and resolved them. You will know how each other have conflict. And I think some of the, in my co-founding relationships, the really good ones have come from people who have conflict in a similar way, compared to the most kind of difficult and fractious and stressful ones have come from people where we just disagree in really different ways, and we have different perspectives on hierarchy and how to resolve problems. I know, Andy, your question was about hiring and initial team. I think the worst mistake I've made there was being part of the hiring team of someone where we didn't really bother with any references. This person was going to join as a head of HR. They were a couple of weeks into the job, and I just gave them my full debrief on all of the problems in the leadership team of the company. We then got back the DBS check on them, because that company handled sensitive data. So we DBS checked everyone. Turned out that when we got this employee's actual driving license, they went by a different name, and they had used a different name because they were convicted for fraud. So I, in the first 2 weeks of this person's role, had just given them all of the kind of inside line on all the difficulties, problems that we faced interpersonally as a company to a fraudster. That was a very bad thing to have done, right? I own that. And I think my learning has been to be much more careful, particularly with what I tell people in their early stages, but also with checking employee histories. That's pretty obvious to people who've worked in big corps, I'm sure.
So as a former head of HR, I also have something to say about this, because the first thing is the co-founders. You're both right. If that doesn't go well, the rest of the hiring won't go well. And once I mediated a conflict between two co-founders, and it was super hard because they already got to a level where they were really angry at each other, and the discussion had gone to a very bad place. But in the end, what the problem was that they never talked about their non-negotiables. What was the thing that made you stay in that company, and that without it, it's not worth for you anymore? And that non-negotiables were conflict between them, the both of them. So it would never be a good partnership. So in the end, they decided that the CEO would keep as a CEO, and that the COO, in the case was a COO, he would be an employee. He would not going to have a share in the company, because that worked better, because he wanted to take part in all the decisions. And the CEO wanted him to trust him with all the decision making regarding business. So this is a non-negotiable. And most of the people don't know their own non-negotiables. So understanding self-awareness in emotional intelligence is super important, because if you don't understand what is basic for you, what makes you still believe that it's worth going through all the hassle of founding a company, then you won't even be able to have healthy discussions with your co-founder. And in the end, that's going to reflect on the team building. Another mistake I see, especially tech leaders making about hiring teams, it's actually hiring people that are their clones. They're very similar to them. So when I do this personality mapping of the team, and we're going to discuss, and that they actually see the picture in front of them, everyone is just on one quadrant, usually here. So they are all very knowledgeable. They're all very similar to them. So you surround yourself with yes people. And that's a sure path for making mistakes. You have to have diversity in thinking. Otherwise, these people can spot mistakes before you do. And if you don't allow that diversity in your team, you will make more mistakes than you would if you had diversity.
And probably bigger mistakes as well. Yeah, from my experience. Yeah.
There's also I think I'm increasingly getting convinced that even with early hires or with co-founders, one of the biggest things that's far more important than anything else is integrity. The intellectual honesty, the integrity that somebody brings to the table, that should match yours. Obviously, hoping that you're yourself as authentic as you want your partner to be. My co-founder, for example, you asked for war stories, and this is one of the best that I have. Is my co-founder joined my company in July of this year. In August of this year, he left his job, his very stable job. We first started talking in October. We connected after 12 years. We'd known each other that long. We connected again in October. Through October to July, we were talking, going back and forth, just building that mindset. In July, he quit and he joined my company. In August, his baby was born premature in ICU for 45 days. And I was scared that I was going to lose my co-founder this early into the journey. And he just came to work every day. Every single day, he just showed up. And even if I'd ask him if he wants to take time off, he's like, no, this is helping me kind of stay focused. This is my game. And he's still with me. And that's the kind of like somebody, I think Paul mentioned in the chat that, no part-time co-founders. It's if you one, you need to go full-time, and second, your co-founders definitely need to be full-time. And that kind of like, if you Michael Thiebel from YC actually had this great advice. You just close your eyes for 3 seconds and think about 3 people who you would love to build a company with, and just go and ask them. And literally, you will find either you've met them, or even if you've not met them, they're the top people who who you've marinated over a lot in your life. Because you have all of those equations in your mind, complementary skill sets, high amounts of values, integrity, all of these are there in your mind. You just got to go and ask them. The max it's going to happen is they're going to say no. But that is super, super critical if you're going to be like building something substantial and you're looking to get a founding team.
I think in all these things, what we're kind of saying is that you need people who are complementary in skills, but similar in values and attitudes and mission. Like, if you are a very sharky person with low personal integrity, I think you could probably found a company with someone else who's sharky with low personal integrity, and you would have low trust in each other and put in place all the right protections. Like, I don't want to found a company with you, but someone else probably does, and you could probably do that in a way that you both got on really well, right? You enjoyed it. You had a good, productive working relationship. I think founders can absolutely be part-time, so long as there's a fairness there. So if one person is putting in more capital up front and is working part-time because they're in some kind of lucrative profession they don't want to leave straight away, I think that's understandable, as long as both sides feel that there's a fairness there. When people start thinking, well, I'm not very pushy, but this other person is really pushy and gets what they want, so that's a good complementary fit. That's when I would worry that the founding relationship becomes pushy versus non-pushy. It's not that one of you is strong in this area and strong in this other area. It's that now there's this unbalanced dynamic between you that, in my experience, leads to resentment, which, to Carol's example, just festers, and eventually people become deep-seated angry with each other because they have core needs that they might not even realize about themselves. That is the situation you want to avoid. Complementary in skills, but very aligned in values and ways of working and commitment.
Yeah, and how do you deal with frustration? So I think that just like in other relationships, you only know that person once you have a disagreement, and you understand how that person deals with frustration. So it doesn't matter if they align with you in everything, but if they are like immature and they have a very bad reaction to frustration, this person will never be a good partner. So I think that that's one of the first things people should be paying attention, besides the skills. I also agree with you. Skills are not as important as people think they are. Not just to find a co-founder, but also in yourself. I see a lot of CTOs too concerned about, do I have an entrepreneurial profile, or do I have the necessary skills to become an entrepreneur, instead of understanding, do I have the emotional intelligence enough to go through these conflicts, to go through these frustrations, and to surf this wave of uncertainty.
There was a time when a previous company, we were based in the co-working space owned by one of our investors with a load of their other portfolio companies. And there was this company literally sat on the other side of the bank of desks from me, where it was like every day, at least once, they would have a blazing row. Like, it was like smashing plates, kind of like volume of row. It was so, I found it really like upsetting, honestly. Like, it really distracted me for like a good hour, because they would be like so vicious with each other. And then one of them would storm out and the other one would follow. But then they would come back and they would be resolved. They had like got to the end of the argument. They had got to some agreement, and they just like cracked on going forward for the rest of the day. And it seemed, at least for a period, to be working for them. And this is when I realized, like, this could not work for me at all. Neither of these people could be my co-founder, but together they're working in a way that works for them and seems to be productive in the way they're handling their conflict and frustration. And so I think it is about that interpersonal match, rather than some absolute standard of, this is a good co-founder and two good co-founders together work. I don't think that's true. I think it's much more about the kind of interlocking jigsaw pieces of, they fit together.
Yeah. I suppose the key skill is the speed at which you can get to know your co-founder and understand whether or not they are a good fit. And that's a difficult skill to learn. That's probably not something you get in textbooks. A lot of what we've just discussed, it kind of brought to mind the 5 dysfunctions of a team book by Patrick Lencioni. At the bottom of his pyramid of dysfunctions, you have lack of trust and fear of conflict. And I think if you can develop those within your team and accept that they are necessary in order for a team to work well, especially in a small, kind of tightly knitted group of people trying to achieve something commercially, if you can do that, you're much more likely to succeed as a company. But if you can't, then is it worthwhile doing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, let's have a chat about advice. So let's say you were put in a room with yourself 5 years ago, in your case, Naman, and longer in Carol and Hull's perspective. But if you could give someone advice before they started on their entrepreneurial journey, and specifically yourself, knowing what you've learned, what would it be? Let's start with Naman.
Certainly, one of the biggest thing is, don't jump into building. Don't jump into writing code. We're all builders. We know how to build, and we go back into our safe bubble of building, because that's why we got into this, right? But don't start with the building part. Start with the understanding part. Explore the map. That's one of the biggest things I could ever say. And something that we didn't talk enough about earlier on, but prepare your family. Prepare your immediate family that you're going to get onto this. This is not just a financial discussion. Hey, no new net new money is going to come into the house. Yes, that is 100% important. But also the fact that you're going to be caught up trying to figure out abstract things that don't exist, that don't look like a job. And that's going to happen for a while. So depending on your family dynamics, whoever is close to you, prepare them for the time that you're going to spend a couple of years in this field.
A couple of years might be optimistic.
True. True. Maybe, hopefully more.
Hopefully less, because hopefully you'll be bringing in some cash sooner than 2 years.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Carol, how about you? What advice would you give yourself?
Well, I would say know thyself. Actually understand what is the purpose that you want to do this. Because one of the mistakes I see is that people they want to get away from something that bothers them. So they focus too much on that. So focus too much on having interference on building, or focus too much on their age and not seeing the big picture. What is your purpose in building and becoming a founder, not just with your product, but in taking this lifestyle, what you want to get out of this, and understand your blind spots. We all have them. So if you actually know what your blind spots are, you're going to reduce the risk of making mistakes, because you can actually hire someone that can fill in that skill or that blind spot that you don't have. You can work on strategies with coaching or mentoring to actually see yourself from an outside perspective. It's very hard to be on your own. So that's why communities like the CTO craft, like the coffees that you make, they are excellent for you to exchange ideas. Don't isolate yourself, and try to find your blind spot. Be courageous to get out of your comfort zone, and identifying and your blind spots can also be on your strengths. You might have a strength that you don't see, so outside perspective is important.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. Yeah, it goes back to ego again, doesn't it? That, self-awareness, being willing to accept that there are certain things that you just don't have as strengths. But as you say, there are probably strengths that you don't realize you have as well. Yeah, definitely. Hole, how about you? What would you tell little Hole?
No, I would say focus much less on the idea and whether the company is going to be successful, and focus more on the people that you're going to do it with. Because doing something that fails with people who you like and respect and get on with is a real joy. It really is, honestly. I mean, I am lucky enough to be doing something that seems to be succeeding with two of my best friends who are also extremely smart and kind of just good people. I would say that matters. That working with them every day makes the biggest difference, more than doing something that I believe in, actually, more than solving problems that I am passionate about. Where I think previously I've seen other people's good ideas and prioritize that ahead of my relationship with the people I would be doing it with. I think that co-founding relationship is so important that you should prioritize that in your decision making over anything else, because genuinely I would much prefer to be failing with good people who I like failing with than succeeding with people I don't enjoy succeeding with.
Absolutely brilliant advice, Hall.
Totally agree. Yeah. Okay, we've got a few minutes left. We've got a few questions in the Q&A section. Let's jump into those. Let's start with one from Dan. Let's bring it up on screen. It's chopped it off, unfortunately, but it's: what advice would you give to somebody who feels like they have a really good idea and have a big interest in becoming a founder, but don't have much knowledge about what it takes, etc.? What learning resources would you point them at? Are there any specific books, courses, communities that you can suggest to Dan?
I would say your best learning resource is your customers. You have a really good idea, solve a problem for real people. You want to become a founder, right, around that idea. The process doesn't, like, there are plenty of books that will give you a process. Like the Lean Startup has lots of good ideas. I think it doesn't describe the idea of an MVP very well. It's commonly misunderstood. There's the Steve Blank books, which try and give you a much more kind of formulaic, day one, go and solve this. But ultimately, I think it should come down to, if you have an idea and people that you think you can solve it for, the place to start is in solving that problem for those people. So go and have a chat with them, work out what is the day one version you could do of how could you do this manually today, and what would people be willing to pay for that, and start doing that, and just slowly build company, product, whatever it is around that concept. But start by solving the problem and worry about what it actually means to be a founder later, because if you focus on solving the problem, the other things will kind of fall into place around that.
Yeah. While you're doing what Hall said, read the mom's test and understand how to talk to your customers. That will tell you how to do what Hall just asked you to do. And the other thing that I will advise is, especially for tech folks, to kind of stop you from building first. Like, I can't stress enough, do not build a product. You will fall in love with the product. Instead, as Hall said, if you have to solve a problem, can you solve it with Excel sheets? I know a guy who was building a chatbot, and really, he onboarded 3 paying customers by just himself talking back as on the chatbot, as if the chatbot was talking back, because he wanted to just get the idea of talking to through the chatbot so correct that he would then replace himself with an actual chatbot. Like, to that extent, do not build a product. If you can solve it on an Excel sheet, solve it on a Lovable app or a Replit app, do it first. Solve the problem first. The product comes later.
The first iteration of Skill Aware was me sitting at a table with people pushing pieces of paper across the table to them, and then looking over their shoulder at what they were typing, and like giving them, you know, feedback and suggestions based on that. It was incredibly lo-fi, and most companies can be done that way.
So it's like prototyping, right? So you're talking about prototyping, and I feel like tech leaders, they need structure. So, okay, so talk to your clients. The question I get back is how? How do I approach them? How introduce myself? So going through like an incubation program might give you the structure you need to actually take this step. Since this is not a comfortable place for tech leaders, like talking to people, opening up, asking questions, if you don't have a method, you'll probably postpone it and you start building because that's easier for you. So break the resistance by getting a method, a process. You don't have, you can use someone else's process to get it started, or your mentor or a friend or from an incubation program. And then eventually you have your own way of talking to these customers.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Well, one of the biggest realizations I came to after I started my first business was that your network as a founder is your currency.
Yeah.
You know, there's that old saying, it's not what you know, but who you know. And I don't think that's the whole answer by any means, but it is something that new founders quite often miss. You know, things like accelerators and clubs and communities and meetups and so on, they really do help. I've met so many good contacts who've helped me all the way through, including some people who are now part of the CTO craft team, I would say. So yeah, definitely don't neglect broadening your church of people, broadening your village. Yeah. Okay, thanks for that, Dan. That was a great question. So there's another one which we started answering in the comments. I think we can bring this one up here as well, so we can chat about it a little bit because we're at 12:59. What do you think about the number of co-founders? Is there a golden number? What's the ideal number of co-founders, if any? Anybody want to say?
I would just use 3. My only problem is with 3 people. Usually 3 people get a lot of conflict because 2 of them may agree and 1 will feel excluded, and that creates a lot of resentment. It usually even happens with children that if you put 3 children, they fight a lot. If you put 1 more, they're in peace. So it's a way of communicating and not feeling excluded. So I think for either 2, 4, but not 3.
I
will say that I am in a company with 3 co-founders, the other 2 of whom are a married couple, whose wedding I took. So I was like when they did the like non-legal bit of their wedding, I was like the celebrant for them, which I say to because we are like quite close as a group, which meant that before we founded the company, we put in place a load of ground rules about how we were going to communicate, when they were going to break off discussions at home, things that areas I wouldn't go to with each of them about the others because it would just be weird for them as a couple. So my view is that with the right approach, it can work really well. But I think really the answer is it comes back to the idea. If you are, I would say more than 1 is always the right answer as far as I'm concerned. It's really hard to do this stuff on your own, but Andy, you might have a different perspective on that. Certainly, I would say that the most important thing is the dynamic between the co-founders. I would think about in 5 years when you're massively successful, who is the kind of minimum group of people you want to be on the board directing the company, and who are the people whose opinions you will value when a massive strategic question comes up, and then minimize down to that group. I think there are definitely dangers with 3 people. I see those. With the right 3 people, I think they can be navigated. But I think they're there at any number more than 2. I think you have the same potential problems. And the answer to that is probably around maturity and approach that you take to solving those, rather than just avoiding that number altogether.
Yeah. I don't think there's a right number. There are, like, as Carol pointed out, some tricky situations to navigate. But I also think that if you're kind of questioning whether somebody should be a co-founder or not, they're probably not. They are absolutely essential, and there's a deeper reason why I say this. Co-founders need to be absolutely essential to the life of the company. If they're not, they're a founding employee. The reason why I say this is because you've at least my sane advice is to be generous with equity. If you're the leading co-founder and you're giving equity to 2 co-founders, then be generous with your equity. And if you're trying to be generous with your activity, with your equity, you can only do so if they are absolutely critical to the company. There is a founder I know who him and his team run like a $12 million ARR business, like very quiet shop in the corner of the internet that just generates a nice cash cow kind of business. He gave, although he was the leading co-founder, he gave equal 25% equity to 3 of his co-founders, so there were 4, simply because he was senior to the other 3 people, because they were like 8 to 9 years of difference in their age, and he didn't want them to feel like they owed him anything, so he gave them all equal equity, equivalent to himself, simply because he wanted to make sure that they have that sense of, I'm equal to you, even if I'm like 9 years younger than you. And that's the extent to which he was generous with his equity. But in order to do that, you've got to understand that this person is like absolutely critical to the life of the company.
Yeah, totally agree. Okay, I think we need to wrap it up there. We're at 3 minutes past 1, but thank you so much to everyone, to Carol, Hole, and Naman. I think it's been
so much.
Great conversation. Thank you also to the audience. Some great questions there. Just a reminder to jump in and get your conference tickets if you don't already have them. They will be going up in price very soon. The next Community Bytes event is on the 28th of January. That's going to be about building a vision that motivates your engineering team. And
can I just quickly say thank you so much, Andy, for putting up, organizing, bringing us all on the same page. Thank you so much. This was really good.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you very much, Nama. But yeah, I'll let you all go, and we'll see you again on the 28th for the next Community Bytes. But thanks again, everyone. I'll see you later.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Ta.